Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as this new incarnation of the Doctor meets his definitive companion. As solutions to replacing your leading man go, regeneration is an absolute masterstroke. But as concepts go, regeneration is hardly the most subtle. So it's to Doctor Who's credit and enduring legacy that it didn't just recast the character, it remoulded it. The same but different, a different look, a different demeanour, different bloke essentially. And to fully commit to the idea, it was a wise move of Troughton and his producers to wring the changes from Hartnell. And, as regeneration is hardly the most subtle of things superficially, this new Doctor has to find out who he is and find his way out in the open, rather than hiding away from prying eyes. This Doctor isn't subtle either. I mean, take his hat. That hat fixation initially did stick out and irritate me a little bit, but I find myself warming to it as it goes on, and it's actually quite charming. I would like a hat like that. Isn't exactly a catchphrase that you'd think would catch on or that rolls off the tongue, but it does make for quite a nice running gag. And what strikes me from this story is the extent to which this new Doctor gets stuck into things in comparison to his predecessor. Sure, Hartnell's Doctor fought when he needed to, but Troughton's Doctor seems to throw himself into things more readily and with more force than the first Doctor did. And when he gets stuck into things in prison, it is through a bravura performance that the Doctor manages to wangle his way back out. His gagging of Grey...
Great heavens, man, your throat.
What?
It's so swollen. Does it hurt you?
No, of course not.
Say ah.
What?
Ah. Oh! I've never seen a silent lawyer before.
And starting the same ruse with Perkins on his eyes before banging his head on the table and asking about headaches are a hoot. This Doctor might not have shown us exactly what he's about yet, but we can safely say that this Doctor is fun. It requires a huge amount of stupidity from Perkins though, but I'm willing to go with it because it's really funny. And later on, Perkins even shows us that he's willing to switch allegiance to whichever side is winning, so the guy is obviously very easily led. Troughton is on the ball throughout and seems way more sprightly than Hartnell, who had more than his fair share of moments of sprite himself. And this Doctor has no qualms about threatening people at gunpoint, and he's actually quite menacing when he does so, even if at one point he does it in drag. Sure, we do eventually find out that the gun isn't loaded, so this stretches the pacifistic character of the Doctor without actually breaking it. He goes at a much faster pace too, which does seem a little bit jarring when you consider that this is essentially just a Hartnell historical. And I think that is what affords the Highlanders its biggest stamp of individual identity, besides being quite a good fun story. This is basically a first Doctor historical, just with the second Doctor instead. I can imagine Ian in the brig, but Ben is an altogether different energy. Ben's from the same time as Ian, but dare I say it, hardly the same class. And I think that makes Ben feel much more like a real person than Ian ever did. Ian was a great character, it was lovely to root for him, good old Ian, always quick with the heroics, but Ben just feels more like a real guy, and therefore way more relatable. And that is another reason why I think the Highlanders ends up with more of an individual identity than most stories within the entire canon of Doctor Who. In fact, I may go so far to say as it's unique. It may be a Hartnell historical, and I guess it's kind of like a last hurrah for the Hartnell historicals. It's just that it's been invaded by a new cast of characters that give it an entirely new dynamic. And it's a very satisfying refresh, and even though I have learnt to stop worrying and love Power of the Daleks again, I still think that this story is actually a better showcase for the show's new contingent than its predecessor. In the space of these 4 episodes, the Doctor gets no less than 3 disguises or aliases. He pretends to be the German Dr. von Wehr, and to be honest with you, I explain that away in my silly little headcanon that Doctor Who forces me to use sometimes, that he himself was personally amused at being erroneously called Doctor Who by Wotan and decided to translate it into German for a little disguise. Not that it matters at all, not that it matters at all, it doesn't matter, why are you making a big deal out of it, it doesn't matter. He's the old woman, and the English soldier. So far, he spent more time pretending to be other people than he has himself, which could even be retroactively explained as a man who has just regenerated for the very first time and hasn't a clue who the hell he is anyway. Whatever the actual reason, and I'm inclined to think it was just because it would be a fun bit of business for the show and for Troughton himself. This early on and this amount of disguises, you'd be forgiven for thinking that disguises might well be this Doctor's thing. Incidentally, the fact that the Doctor's clothes are later found on a rubbish heap is a cracking little detail which is sold brilliantly by the Doctor's incredulous delivery of it.
Hey, you got your own clothes back?
Yes. Can you imagine? I found them thrown out on the rubbish dump behind the inn.
And the supporting players are far stronger than the previous stories from the word go. And again, that might be down to Doctor Who's inherent confidence at tackling history at this point, even though this is the story where it leaves history behind for a little bit. For a little bit, read like a while. And for a while, read like very long time. Jamie is fine, but will go on to be so much more developed. He doesn't really make all that much of an impression in this story, and I know he goes on to be fantastic, but here he comes across like a very fine guest turn. A much more likely candidate for the new companion on the basis of this story, seems to me anyway, is Kirsty. Possibly a second Katrina, although she does come from the same time and place as Jamie, but she's definitely one of the warmest characters in it. There's a moment where I side with her over Polly, to be honest. When Polly calls her a stupid peasant, I find myself thinking, that's a bit harsh, Duchess, wind your neck in. But if that doesn't reflect too well on Polly, then the rest of the story definitely does. By the end of episode 1, she's already been better served by the Highlanders than she was in the previous two stories combined. Her ease at getting the better of Finch is wonderful to watch, especially after having been relegated to making coffee at the Snowcap and voluntarily tidying up at the colony. And when she gets the better of him and cheekily teases him a little bit later at the tavern, it's probably her best moment yet. It's definitely her best story so far. More of this, Polly, please. Just less of the cruel patronising. Ben is his usual reliable self as well, and I've already mentioned the new energy he brings to the trope of one of the regulars being incarcerated, where he rings the changes not only from Ian but also from Stephen as well. And Ben and Polly are, I think, the first of a new type of companion. All of their predecessors were, to some extent and differing extents, cut from the same cloth as at least one of the characters that came before them. Except for those two that were bumped off, obviously. Whereas Ben and Polly feel like something entirely new, as does the new recruit. It's Ben alone who makes the cliffhanger to episode 3 so good. We like Ben, he's made us like him. And the show just drops him, unflinchingly bound into the icy cold waters. It's stark and it's frightening, and it's further enhanced by the cliffhanger to the previous episode, which I find really interesting. The cliffhanger to that previous episode, episode 2, doesn't put anyone in any immediate danger. Instead, it's an atmospheric and a chilling highlight of what could lie in store for them further down the line. So that it then very skillfully sets up the next 2 episodes is some really nifty script work. And like all good nifty script work, it doesn't really draw too much attention to itself. The battle on the brig, going off the existing still images that we have, looks really good indeed. And feels like it would be really satisfying considering how well all of the characters and the conflicts between them have been set up. Even in still frame form, it has the sense of things coming to a head and therefore offers closure. Then they're off with a new crew member in tow, a complement of 4 for the first time in ages. Jamie's reluctance to enter the TARDIS at the end is a nice touch, and an even nicer one is Polly's affectionate persuading of him to follow her. He feels like he'll fit right in. It's a shame that this crew didn't have more pure historicals to shake up and make their own, but I am really glad that they have this one. They took a familiar type of Doctor Who and they put their own stamp on it, and as a result it's a really fun story. And with Patrick Troughton doing sterling work even as he's still finding his feet, I am so excited to be carrying on with this voyage even after 144 episodes. The Doctor getting the better of Grey, either as Dr. Von Vere, getting him to go ah, or pickpocketing him at the end.
Please yourself. You're just a stupid peasant.
You're better than that, Polly. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this stopover in Scotland, then you know how YouTube works. Please give it a like and share. I would be immensely grateful. And what do you think of the Highlanders? Are you glad to see the back of the pure historicals for what feels like pretty much the rest of the show? Or do you think Doctor Who lost something when it left them behind? And do you think this is a good start for Jamie, or is his joining the TARDIS at the end out of nowhere, and does it feel tacked on? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a voyage under the sea. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll meet you in Atlantis.